West. I'm I'm a realtor from the coast. I'm out in Santa Cruz. I've been a realtor since 2012, so real estate is where I come from in my background, but I also have a lot of building experience. I think all of you guys are here because there's a lot of buzzwords that are going around, and truly I'm going to try to give you a 1 hour crash course on how to build an ADU. So I know it's a lot of information. Don't feel overwhelmed. Don't furiously have to take notes. This is just an introduction so you can better answer questions that your clients might have, so you could potentially start your own project someday, or you just to kind of know some of those buzzwords that get thrown around to really understand and get a better grasp of what's happening out there in the market. Because I'm going to try to go through my slides, I'll try to kind of zoom through a little bit, and then we'll save lots of time at the end for questions. I've noticed a lot of the questions get answered as I move along because there's so much that we're trying to put in together here. So I'll just get started. Let's see, Jody. If not, I can swap it for one of these. Hello, hello. It is. It's just quiet. You always go from either you're screaming into the mic or no one can hear you. Feel free to let me know if you guys can't hear me. I tend to talk a little fast and I'll try to slow it down, obviously, but projecting, it's a big room to try to go through. So Joyline Homes is a prefab developer out of Santa Cruz County. We started back in 2019. The main thing is we were trying to find some way to find affordable housing out there. Shortly after we were founded, we ended up having the CZU lightning fire complexes, and we lost about 900 houses. Since then, Joyline Homes has built about 10 houses up in CZU. Altogether, we've only had 25 approved homes up there. So I think we've got a pretty good lead to jump on trying to figure out a way to do it affordable. So we primarily focus on manufactured prefab. And it's just through our experience. I've come from a long line of builders. My grandpa, my dad, everybody was a full site built construction, and definitely Santa Cruz County, Santa Clara County. It's one of the most difficult and expensive ways to build out here. So we're trying to kind of just figure out a way that we can develop property a little bit more cheaply. Your land is going to be very expensive. Your utilities are going to be very expensive. So if you can save money on the house construction portion, but you can be building to the same codes, it's really going to be the fastest, least expensive way to do this. So obviously you guys are here because you know about ADUs. I'm sure you have a lot of questions about them, but kind of just to jump in of why it's important that we understand this. As realtors, just Bay Area people, the main thing is we need more housing. We've got to figure out a way to get these things built. We don't want to be reliant on just having large scale productions for affordable housing. It really comes down to homeowners or lot owners being able to develop their lots and their land without wasting too much time with the bureaucracy of going through the county and the city. So sometimes building an ADU absolutely can be a faster way to build than trying to do any other type of home construction, like doing a duplex or something like that. Big note for all of us is going to be increasing property value. As a realtor, I'm sure you've come across quite a few people that maybe have outgrown their house, or they want to get something that they can age in place that's a little bit safer, more ADA friendly. And instead of trying to go shop for a house, that's not always a good solution, especially at the cost of what everything is now. So if we have a scenario where maybe your homeowner that's got a lot of equity in their land, they could develop an ADU on their parcel, and now you could give them something that is going to be a great lifelong home for them to age in place, and then also have passive income of renting out the ADU on the side. In Santa Clara County, you can rent out your ADUs, but no vacation rentals. So no Airbnbs. They just want you to be there at least 30 days. A lot of ADUs are coming across California. We're seeing the biggest jump right now, definitely down in LA, but the Bay Area is not far behind. We're having a pretty big spike lately with a lot of these new rules that got passed last year and the year before. They've really made it a lot easier and streamlined to be able to build. So I know that, yes, sir. No Airbnbs. I think you're going to see that a lot. There's been a lot of pushback from hotels, especially, but the Airbnbs have removed so many long-term housing units. And really, you're going to see for a while, most of the counties, anywhere, especially on the coastline, they're going to be discouraging Airbnbs. They're going to really want to get long-term rentals in place. Some of the counties as well will give you programs to give you a benefit back if you agree that you will keep affordable housing residents inside of it. What's that? I'm not sure about San Mateo, but you can find out really easily any other counties. I do a lot of builds in Santa Clara and Santa Cruz. But San Mateo is going to be pretty close to Santa Clara. Most likely they would discourage Airbnbs as well. So there's a lot of buzzwords get thrown out there with ADUs. So I'm going to jump into types, and that way you can kind of understand the different ways that people build, and these are the different options at your disposal. I'm sorry if you guys can't read. Sometimes the text is a little small. This is pulled from the county website. But basically there's three main ways to do an ADU. It's either going to be one attached, one detached, or a junior ADU. A junior ADU is how you would allow, not only could you have your primary residence, you can have a junior ADU inside of the primary residence and do an ADU on the property. So you can actually do two if you take advantage of the junior ADU. Junior ADUs are a little quirky though. Basically, you want to have a separate entrance on the main part of the house so they can use it like a full independent unit. But sometimes you're only going to have like an efficiency kitchen. It's not going to be a full standalone unit. It would be sharing resources of the main house. The big thing is for anything that's one attached ADU or one detached, we have to figure out a way to have it a permanent foundation. You want to actually, permanently make this a seismically sound home for somebody. You've got to figure out the sanitation. Either it's a septic tank that you're also going to plumb into, or if you've got city sewer services, and then you always have to have a heat source in the property. So a lot of times when people are designing like garages that they want to convert, they really don't remember the fact that you have to have a full contained a separate heating unit that's not reliant on the primary house. The main thing is if you do one attached or one detached, there's no owner occupancy requirement. So it means you can live in your primary house, you can build this ADU, you can rent them both out completely separately and leave the area. If you do a junior ADU, just note that just about all the counties that I've seen, you have an owner requirement. So you can't rent out that tiny ADU and the main house. It can just create too many issues. Yes, sir. Yeah, it's just a way that they do it. You can basically get a whole second unit inside of a main house. So we see it sometimes if you've got like a lot of these old Victorian houses that are built on like 4 levels, you're allowed to just take one full level of that house and turn it into a junior ADU. Kind of like a big house. You don't have to have junior building anymore. So yeah, so a junior ADU has to be less than 500 square feet. If you would like to do a junior ADU larger than a 500 square feet, it just becomes your single ADU for the property, and you wouldn't be allowed to build 2 of them. You can do, yeah, so they have rules right now, and right now they want to do the least at the minimum is going to be 800 square feet to 1,200 square feet. Let's do this. Sure. Okay. Okay. See if you guys can hear me a little bit. Ooh.
I'm gonna turn it down.
For the junior ADU, it could be the garage that's converted and it could be on top of the garage.
Yep, you can do either way. Exactly. The main thing is no matter how you're going to build these things, they don't want it to look like a duplex. They don't want it to have both entries on the same side. This is also for safety and fire as well. If there's a fire in the ADU, they need to have a second entrance that a fire truck could access, or if an emergency ambulance, anything like that needs to access.
The single family cannot be within the ADU.
Correct, exactly. You'd have to have it separate. Exactly, in the primary house. It's part of the primary house as a junior ADU. And then if it's a full attached to the side or it's detached, then it's just considered an accessory dwelling unit, an ADU.
So another question, this is on the website?
Yeah, this is all in slides that I've created for you, but you can find out all of this on the Santa Clara County website. Yes, ma'am.
Can you have both junior ADU inside the house and another outside?
You can, yeah. You can have either a detached and attached, one or the other, and a junior ADU. You can have both of those. So if you had a primary residence and you have a way that maybe one floor of the house or a couple of bedrooms, you want to turn that into a junior ADU, you can still go build a full detached ADU on top of that. So basically, these are all laws that were passed back in 2022. They weren't enforced until 2023. This is all Gavin Newsom that really pushed this. Basically, what they did is they got rid of the duplex requirement to be able to build an ADU. There were a lot of counties and cities that were discouraging ADUs because they didn't want to have duplexes that weren't zoned for that. And basically, the state of California stepped in and said, you guys are not approving housing fast enough. We don't have enough units for the people that live here. We need to start approving these a lot faster. So now they basically have said every single primary house, as long as you can accommodate the setbacks, the water and the sanitation, you're allowed to do one attached ADU or one detached ADU, and then also have a junior ADU unit. So it's a pretty big thing to pass. I'll get into setbacks and stuff here in just a few. Yep. No, so typically an ADU in most scenarios, they don't actually have their own address. This is where a lot of times you'll see something that'll say 123 Main Street, Unit A, Unit B. A lot of times you're not going to separate out the addresses because it has to do with taxation. You don't want to be double taxed on both units as long as you can avoid it. I'll get into condoization here in a little bit because it does get more complicated. But usually you're sharing the same water meter and you're using the same electric meter. So that's another reason why you don't typically have two addresses on it. So tiny homes on wheels, this is definitely like a buzzword right now. Just as a heads up, they are not currently allowed in Santa Clara County. So in Santa Clara, and San Mateo is going to fall under this line, they don't want movable tiny houses. They want you to be developing your land to create improvement for long term. They want it to be seismically sound. They want it to be built to all the fire, health, and safety codes. These movable tiny homes, this is something that's just starting to get approved down in LA, Santa Cruz County, you can have it. It's kind of quirky. I wanted to mention it just because if you did have somebody that's shopping over the hill for land, you can actually put one of these movable tiny houses as your sole primary residence. You don't even need to build a real house anymore. It just is a way for people to get into their property and start that development. Bless you. You do, but the movable is a little bit easier. You basically just, instead of having a permanent foundation that you're attaching a house to, you can just have a parking pad. But you do need to have usually a sewer or a septic. You have to have water, and then you have to have electric. But even the movable tiny homes in Santa Cruz County, we just got one approved that doesn't even have electricity. PG&E will not service the lot. They're way too far up there. They're actually letting them go full dependent off of generators and solar. So they're a standalone, and they got it approved. And they wouldn't have been able to build a regular house. So the nice thing about that is if you did own a piece of property, you haven't been able to do anything with it, there is a potential you could go this route. And I would say it's definitely something I think we're going to see growing quite a bit. It's only been enacted for about a year in Santa Cruz, and we've already seen a big uptick in it. Going to jump into methods. There's a few different ways that you can build an ADU. The cost has a huge fluctuation. A lot of times it's really just going to have to do with the lot. Your actual lot location is what's going to determine what you can do. The ways that most of us are familiar with building a house is called site built. So it basically means that you're hiring a contractor to come out. They're going to come take a look at the lot. They're going to put together a site plan to figure out where your utilities would be. They're going to figure out something called a building envelope. So you can figure out exactly how large of a house you can fit, accommodating the setbacks, knowing what your water and sewer is going to be. I will say that this is absolutely the longest build process because you have so many touches that need to happen on the county or the city. If you see Santa Clara County, they're giving out some free plans right now. That would be to build a site built is exactly how you would utilize those plans. Completion time that we're seeing for site built houses is usually about 2 to 3 years. I'd say is pretty standard. The cost right now, I would say, is really bumping up to that about $1,000 a square foot. When you're accounting for, you have to have a framer, a general contractor that's overseeing everything, putting in insulation, plumbing, electric, and then connecting to all of your utilities. That is why it takes the longest. The actual build piece of the puzzle is not very long. It's really getting through the county to get all of these checks ahead of time to get those finalized build permits. Once you start the framing too, you actually have pretty regular intermittent checks that the city comes by, and that's usually when things are getting flagged and they say, oh, I know we said you could do your plumbing this way, but we actually want you to add like X, Y, and Z. And I feel like that is the most frustrating thing to deal with anywhere in the Bay Area trying to build is get past some of that stuff. Modular. So modular homes, you're kind of stepping one step away from the site built. You're going to have some of those pieces put together off site. So either you can be a full kit where parts are labeled just like IKEA and you're going to be installing a house from scratch. You can also have a modular where they've built maybe 80% of the home and you're just attaching the sections on site. This is how you get some really cool prefabricated like steel buildings and things like that. They absolutely are making really awesome houses. But I think that one thing to caution, I get a lot of clients that will bring up like, I saw that you can buy these on Amazon. The problem is those are not built to Santa Clara County code. You're going to have to completely gut that entire thing to bring it up to code of what you want. So sometimes it can save a little bit of money on building materials, or perhaps you can have a really unique look of, huge transom windows or something like that, but it's not always going to be a good fit for the area, especially if you have certain things like the WUI overlay, which is like woodland urban fire districts, where we're really having to like really beef up a lot of our items. So not always the quickest way to do it, but they are beautiful. So these you can get down. It really just depends on what are the materials that they're putting together. Is it a kit that has been approved by HUD, which is the HUD and HCD are basically our two regulating authorities that we want to be able to pass through. And HCD is a state regulation that they can actually give you an insignia on the home that says, yes, this home was built 100% to code. This is exactly what we want. And if you get that HUD certification on there, that means that basically the county and the planning departments can just sign off on the house. They don't actually inspect the house. They don't need to know any of the plumbing certifications or what installation or anything like that. They just know it's been built to a state level that supersedes the county and the city. It's automatic approvals. So if you get a modular on that, you can get a house built within 12 months. If it's a kit type of a situation, I unfortunately had a gal that was in Pleasanton that she ordered a kit from Canada, and they wanted to send over a bunch of contractors to install it for her on site. Well, they are not California contractors. They're not legally allowed to do that. So she still had to hire a general contractor to oversee the entire build. It added quite a bit of money for her project. This was before I got to talk to her. Yes, sir.
The cost, it's based on, I mean, it's considerable. I mean, the first one, the side build is 600 to 1,000, this one 250 to 800. How is that based on what?
It's based on what it costs. How many hours are you going to be hiring a contractor to be assembling these? So one of the big pieces of the puzzle is, are you going to have a contractor that's out there that has to put everything together? You've got a contractor hiring subs to put together the framing, and then you put it together the installation. And now you're getting a plumber to come out and put the plumbing into the house. A lot of the cost fluctuation has to do with how much has that already been handled. So some of the modular kits, for example, they already have all the interior plumbing and electricity that's already inside the house. So that saves you those costs ahead of time, if that makes a little bit more sense. But it's also, you can do steel construction, you can do wood construction, and now they're doing like some interesting polycarbonate molds that they're trying to do. So you see a huge fluctuation on materials. So it's really hard to say this is what a modular costs, because it's the biggest range of options that you could have. I specialize in prefabricated, manufactured, and it's because I've come from a building background and I've kind of trial and error to see what works. By far, cheapest way to build, fastest way to build. The fact that you can have the house, 90% of the house, 95% of the house is all built off-site. They're fully framing the walls. They already have quartz countertops. They put in the flooring. All of the plumbing is up to spec. It's everything that you want is already done. Usually on a prefab, the houses are arriving in 2 to 3 sections. Each section is about 13.5 feet wide, and they can go anywhere from 20 feet long to 75 feet long. It just has to do with how easy is the access. Around Santa Clara, most everything getting through the cities is not that big of a deal. Power lines are no big issue. What we really come into problems with is that if we have like redwood trees that are really close to road lines, if we have a fence that's blocking the access, that's usually more the issues that we have. Personally, Joyline Homes, we don't do cranes. It adds about $35,000 just to hire the crane for the day. So we've learned that if people are trying to get these houses affordably as possible, we will really want to drive them in as much as possible. And it's too much weight once you do the crane. Yep, you still do. Exactly. You still do. It is. And I actually have a little piece I'll talk about process here next. Not to worry. So the main thing that makes these the fastest and the quickest is that you can have your contractor out to the lot, and they can be doing all of the preparation for the lot while the home is being simultaneously built in the factory. So you're not waiting for something to be done on site to be able to get started for your plumbing. There's no steps that are waiting for one another. So for us, when we place a home order with the factory, I can have that house fully built within about 3 months, which is incredible. And then when it arrives on site, it only takes about 4 to 6 weeks to have it fully installed. So you're attaching it to the foundation and the utilities you've already prepared on the property. But definitely the smoothest, fastest way to go. And that HUD certification is what makes it so awesome. HUD basically is a California state governing authority that they guarantee that the home is built to certain specs So then they know it can go anywhere in the county. So CC&Rs don't override this. HOAs can't override this. You can't discourage and say, oh, we don't want manufactured homes in this community. None of that's allowed by law anymore. It's all been thrown out because basically they created this regulatory body to prove that the house is built exactly the same as a site built. These are wood frame construction. We use the exact same insulation. It's just that they're made a lot less expensively because they're made more on like a factory line. So you have just tons of materials. All of the wood has already been ordered. You're not dealing with all the middlemen in between. You're not hiring subcontractors that could mess up and it's his first day on the job. Like these are regular, salaried guys that have put together thousands of houses. So it's a lot more easier to get some quality control as well. Yes, ma'am. Yes, she's curious how much choice, and for customization, we typically is just kind of a quick answer. We don't change any of the engineering specs. So if we can avoid moving walls, dimensions of the house, where the windows and doors are put, that's what keeps all of our plumbing and everything unseen exactly the spot that it is. That makes it easier and faster. But everything that touches the surface materials, you can change any of that out. So like these houses are shipped with sheetrock on them, but we've even had it where there was somebody that ordered a house with no sheetrock because they had their own customization of what they wanted to do on the inside of it once it arrived.
And same insurance issue, different types of construction.
Sure.
Doesn't have to be now, I'm saying.
Totally. Well, the main thing, just as a very quick response, is it really depends on how the home is built. The most difficult way to get something insured is through site built, because now you're going through the specs that you have to review everything with the general contractor, and usually CAL FIRE is trying to look at your individual specs. If it's built to HUD and it's ordered for any fire code for where the location's going to be, it already passes insurance. There's no special requirements that you have to do. But that's why you try whenever possible. If you can get something that's HUD and HCD approved, then it's already been guaranteed to come to that area. It's built to the exact code of what a site built would be.
When you talk about prefab
Mhm.
and tiny, you still have to build path for this.
Yeah, so you're usually doing concrete perimeter foundations. You're not doing slabs as often, but yeah, we do concrete perimeter. Crawl space underneath, yep, and it's a lot easier for the pads too. We've found that that's a lot less expensive to do. Concrete perimeter foundations, like 27,000 to 55,000 is about all you're gonna do. Slabs are way more expensive because you have so much more concrete that you're bringing in.
So, and if you're plumbing
Mhm.
underneath the house,
Yep, sure is, exactly.
great.
And then like the water heater is gonna be like exterior access to it, so it's really easy to connect with cross space, yeah, exactly. Of course. Okay, so definitely the fastest way to build. If you have a lot that's nice and flat, it's right in the middle of the city, it's really easy for us to access it, you can truly have a house built in 8 months. And it's because just the main thing is trying to get approval for your sewer and your electricity and your water. If you can get those things done quickly, it's very, very quick for us to get those official permits and get approval to build a foundation and then install one of these houses. Usually when something takes 12 months, or I've had a couple up in the Santa Cruz Mountains that took quite a bit longer, it's actually because of requirements that the land needed. So for example, we had one that was a CZU fire victim. It was an old cabin from the 1960s. They allowed us to use the same septic tank that was already there. They allowed us to use the water connections that were already there, but he did require that they put in like 150-gallon drum of water that needed to be able to be accessed at all times. And he had to put in like a paved fire truck turnaround. And like, that was about $70,000 he didn't want to have to spend, but that was what took us the longest amount of time to get approved. Was not actually the house at all. It was these extra things that CAL FIRE wanted him to do to be able to rebuild. But definitely the lowest cost by far, like the homes that I sell through Joyline, those start at about $250 a square foot. So our houses start about $250 a square foot. And then to get to our total price per square foot, it's really just, there is a general contractor that's always going to be involved. We want to figure out what is he going to charge you to connect the sewer or the septic tank, and then what are you going to do for your foundation? And so, yes, ma'am.
Airbnb, but you can rent it out though, right?
You can rent it out, yeah. And if you're down in Paso Robles or somebody that allows the Airbnbs, you can definitely build an ADU just to be a vacation rental. But areas like, I think you're going to see it across most of Los Angeles and anywhere in the Bay Area, anywhere where housing is really at a premium, they're going to discourage Airbnbs. So most of those, they really just want to have long-term units, long-term rentals.
And then I have a question on,
Going to be with the permit process or?
Yeah, so it's really easy. So for us, what we do is we specialize as the home supplier. So we usually you're working with a general contractor. And so I have an awesome network of general contractors that I can put you in touch with, but I really only start to be activated, if you will, when the house is being built. So sometimes it can take, depends on what people's schedules are. There's some people that they buy a lot and maybe they're going to take a year to put together that septic tank. It's hard for us to be a part of all of that piece of the puzzle, but usually a site planner and a general contractor can just get started. And as soon as you basically have that initial permission to build, that's when you order your house. So it can go pretty smoothly.
I've got 2 Zoom questions.
Sure.
Do these Santa Clara County rules apply in, my guess is unincorporated cities, San Jose, et cetera?
Yeah, so if you're not within the city of Santa Clara, my last couple of slides on here, which again, I'll get shared with everybody, I go into a couple of the specifics, the actual county. And if you were here in person, there's a couple of little flyers, but all of this is available online. So this is just the county website, and then they have one for the city of Santa Clara as well.
And it does apply to incorporated cities as well.
Well, it's it's going to be the same general rules for anything that's going to be county. So even if it's unincorporated or it's still within the state of California, it's still going to default to that California specifics. It's actually becomes a little more stringent. Obviously, it's more when you step into the city. So the city itself, that's when things change a little bit. Like surprisingly enough, you no longer have to have a parking space, but there'll be different requirements on what the outside of the house looks like, for example, like
Okay,
what the access is.
2 more.
Sure.
The per square foot cost shown, is that for the home delivered with the foundation or just the home?
So my 300 to 350 a square foot, I've tried to keep it kind of as standard as possible to kind of be able to compare apples to apples. We count that 350 as the home has been delivered, installed, and a foundation is included. I am not quoting for utilities. That is the one thing that's very difficult for me to do, but we're going to assume that if you're looking at an ADU, you already have a primary. You already have some type of a sewer or water or something we can connect into, and that's what would make it a lot easier. If, for example, you're going to develop a raw piece of land, it's really hard to give you a price per square foot on that. When nowadays, if you need to get like a septic tank installed, that can be anywhere from $40,000 to $80,000. It's really tough to estimate that for every single parcel.
And then last question on
Mhm.
Zoom so far. How big does the lot have to be to allow a small AUD?
There is no minimum lot size. So it actually has to do with your setbacks. It has to do with being able to fit the unit onto your property. It doesn't have to do with, there's no minimum square footage that you can shoot for. And they're very clear about that, like that was one of the new California laws. They can't discourage you based on the size of your lot. As long as you can accommodate for the setbacks that are needed, they'll let you build it. What was that? So for an ADU, the minimum square footage that they want you to build is 799 square feet. So that would be your minimum. And then the maximum that they'll let you do is going to be 1,200. Of course. So prefab costs, again, are the easiest ones that I can kind of account for. I can tell you exactly what the home is going to cost. I can give you a pretty good estimate. We say about 30% onto your actual model cost to be a good estimate for delivery and installation. Delivery is not very expensive. It's maybe 7,000 to 8,000 per section. You're going to be a 2 to 3 section house. Delivery is not that bad. Installation, there's a pretty big range because you're using a general contractor to build any of your finished materials. Do you want to put in a patio? Do you want an engineered driveway? Do you want to have a garage built? That's usually the fluctuations that we see. That'll just be between you and your project manager, what you guys decide you want to do. Utility modifications, if you can utilize anything that's there, that obviously saves you money. If you're going to build an ADU way off the side, something else, you're probably going to have to put in something else, some other type of like a water main or something like that. And that's when you start to get expensive. So again, these houses, the prefabs that I'm used to selling, they're built exactly the same. And this is why HUD allows them, is they're built exactly to the same specs as what you would regularly expect for a site-built house. So we really try to go for as beefy of insulation as possible. When I started working with Joyline, we basically had a few different factories that we could utilize to build our homes at. We're not building their houses, we're building our own houses and utilizing their factory. The factory that we chose is because they're really high up on LEED certified, and they actually keep up with a lot more of like the high R values, which is what we need in California. If you get a manufactured home provider that's trying to cut costs, that's the first thing they do is to cut down insulation, and now you can't get it built. That's usually when you have issues, is insulation's the big one. So for us, because we built all of these fully offsite and we want everything to be functional, basically pretty quickly after it arrives, everything is sold with everything inside of it. So you have your water heater, you've got a high efficiency furnace, everything's already built into it. The main thing is that if after the home arrives, you want to upgrade something, you want to go to full solar. These are solar ready trusses. You can fully attach anything that you want. You're just trying to utilize the factory for as much as possible to keep your building costs low. And then you can customize the house on some things when it's currently in site and fully installed.
You think the requirements were good?
$799. $799 for an attached or a detached, but if you want to do a junior ADU where it's inside, like inside of the primary, you can get down to 500 square foot. Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, so that will be a regular ADU. So they kind of set forward what they would like to have. They would like all ADUs, whether it's detached or attached. So if it's a garage that's attached and it's an upper level, or the garage is fully on its own, they would still like to start at $799. But I absolutely have seen approvals come in for less than that. And it's usually you're just explaining to them, okay, this is the current parameters that we're working with. This is how we will finish off the structure. And a lot of times you can get those approved. Yes, ma'am.
So. This type of. Compared to like high the cost structure, this one's more cost effective, right? And then streamline the process, like getting the.
Exactly. So as an example, if you were going to hire a general contractor to build you a house, he would have to contact a wood supplier. That wood all has to be shipped to your house and delivered. It's all packaged. And so you're paying that material cost for just the amount to build your house. When you do something like this as a factory, we have direct sourcing for all of our lumber. So instead of them, getting a few 2x4s and now some of the 2x4s were damaged or something, you completely eliminate all of that. You can just basically buy in bulk for the amount of building 300 houses at one time. So a lot of the waste is reduced on that, and that's why we keep costs so much lower. It's absolutely the easiest way to do it. So basically you have everything in stock fully at the factory, ready to assemble, and they're basically working in a streamline, just like you would put together a car. If you were to try to build a Tesla in your backyard versus utilizing a factory to use it, that's really the big difference.
Have any statistic to show how much cost effective compared to hiring a contractor versus using this material?
That's kind of roughly what this is, but this is becoming from a background of construction and knowing what it takes to be able to do it and knowing basically like how long it's going to take to do. So as a bare minimum, if you look at what in any county that you live in, if you look at what the resale value of a house is, you're going to get a pretty good idea of what a site-built house is going to cost you. So I'd say for most of Santa Clara or Santa Cruz County, it's going to be really normal to find 1,000 square foot to 1,200 a square foot to be able to build something. Some of those prices are truly set by contractors because that's what they would need to make money off of to be able to resell the property. If anything, it's going to be more expensive than what current houses are out there because they need to make a little bit of profit on top of that. But it's not a standardized cost of what it would cost to do a site build because you could get somebody from Craigslist that's going to come out and build you something totally different. The problem is that you don't have a standardization of how that's being put together. So there could be cost fluctuations, but it's going to be trickier to know exactly what that contractor is charging you for.
So it's standardized, right, using that, this kind of material, and is it, the process including the permit or no permit?
It includes the permit. So when you do a prefab house, you're initially applying for a building permit to basically develop your land. Can I get permission to put in a septic tank? Can I get permission to put in a foundation? This is the size of the house I'm building. So you're going to do that first step regardless of how you build. All of that part is exactly the same. The main thing is once they say, yes, you're allowed to build that 1,000 square foot ADU, now if you're doing HUD, everything is already included. You don't get any additional permits for the construction of the home. All of those are handled by HUD at the factory. So that's all included in the cost. Versus if you did a site build, now you just step up to the county and the city, and now you're going to pay for each individual inspection at every little step of that build. And that's what takes so long. And that's where there's a lot of fluctuation in price too, because it's not usually a general contractor is not the one who's installing your plumbing. He's going to hire a subcontractor and then he's going to pass along that rate to you plus his little bit of markup.
Let's say the homeowner decide to go with this material, then you guys will have to come in and evaluate and see if it's it's okay to deliver, right?
Yeah, so for us, we don't even have to go out to the site. Basically, we just look at where the map is of the location of the home. And then we use a transporter, and the transporter will just tell us, yes, I can deliver there. No, I can't deliver there. And so it's a lot easier. You don't have to do site inspections quite the same. Versus a site built, you're gonna have a contractor come out and actually like put together a feasibility report for you to tell you what you're gonna have to do. It's gonna be a little bit trickier. Just a few more steps are involved because he's gonna be engineering things a little bit differently. So regardless of how you're gonna do it, any of the ways, site built, modular, or manufactured, this is the first step that you do. Huge fan of getting consultants. Consultants are awesome. We use quite a few of them here locally in town in Santa Clara. You've got a really cool one that's called Hogan Land Services. Basically, they put together the site plan for you. So a lot of those questions of what are my setbacks and what's going on with these easements, they can help you figure out exactly how big of a building plan you could do and help you figure out lower costs as well. So they'll be able to say, okay, if you make it a little bit closer to the house, we can utilize existing lines or we don't have to dig anything up. Like it's amazing how much stuff they can really save you costs on. Huge fan. So the feasibility study, this is what we were talking about. You're gonna have to do this either way. They're gonna be able to also help you with if it's got the wildland urban interface zone, the WUI. Those are extra build specs that no matter how you're gonna build, you have to be able to build to a way that makes it a little bit more fire resistant. So all of our houses, Joyland Homes, we already kind of prepared for that where we're based. So it's a lot easier to make sure that those happen. I will say that most contractors are going to be up to snuff. They're going to know exactly what they have to do to get past those WUI certifications. But I will say that like most modular kit builds are not going to be built to the specs that you need. There'll be improvements that are needed after the house arrives. So site built process, the main thing is to remember that you're going to have a contractor involved with every step of the build on site. They're going to have to be able to get those approval processes. They can't just steamroll through and try to get the house done as soon as possible. You're going to be waiting for the city and the county. So just be able to kind of plan for that when it comes to budgeting and also for your timeline. So manufacturer process does go a lot smoother. Basically, you're going to do that initial site plan, get permission from the county to build. And then as soon as they give you the green light, you basically just have to order your house while your foundation and your utilities are prepared. So it cuts down on cost, obviously, and time quite a bit. So for Joyline Homes, we can customize any of the decor finishes. So we have a pretty nice catalog online. You can pick whatever cabinets or quartz countertops or flooring or any of that kind of good stuff. All that stuff is being put in on the house while it's being constructed on the factory, so you don't have to wait for that on site. Usually the actual installation process goes pretty quick. About 3 weeks is about all you need to attach it. Just longer if you're going to build like a deck or stairs or garage or something like that. The main thing is that they want to see you attach that manufactured home prefab. They want to see you attached to a foundation. That's how they get those little property taxes from you. So the main part of that permit, which is actually the only thing that the city and the county weigh in on, is called a 433A. It's they come and they look at the house and say, yep, these are all of the HUD build specs. This looks good to go, green light. And then they'll ask for this one piece of permit information. But that's what actually turns it. You don't pay sales tax on a manufactured house because you have this 433A. It's attached to the property. If you did those movable tiny houses, you do pay sales tax on those because those are not real property. Yep. Yep. So mobile homes are kind of the old way of doing things. Mobile homes actually haven't really been allowed in most areas to turn into a permanent structure. They're not made to go onto a permanent foundation like this. And that's why you have like a renewal with the DMV. It's just like a mobile home, movable home. And so we still have those tiny houses on wheels. That's also part of the same process. Those aren't usually attached to a real foundation. Your taxes go up on this because you've improved the property. So same thing if you remodel your house, technically, they can add to your taxes that way too. But you don't have to pay like the acquisition sales tax on it, and you don't have to pay registration the same way. And you're actually improving your property as well. So you're spending like $350 a square foot to build the home. But if you were to resell your house because it's real property, you've actually added to your property value. So that $1,000 a square foot that you can get, that'd be your cost difference to pay yourself back on it. Versus like when you do a remodel on a house, you know how they say if you remodel your kitchen, maybe you'll be lucky to get 80% back. And ADU is luckily one of those, so you can probably get all of your funds back depending on how you build it. So a couple little items, we're cruising along here. Sorry if I'm talking fast, but we're almost through the big stuff here. So the main thing is budget. It's really tough to educate your clients on what a budget is going to be for something like this. I would say the things that really cause a budget to skyrocket is if you have a lot of engineering that you need to do. If you're trying to build an ADU and it's got a slope on the back side of it, you're gonna have to put in something to stabilize that foundation. If you have some really weird drainage, you're inside of, looks like a little bit of a marshland in the back. If you want to get that build approval, that's usually what takes the most money up front, is to prepare for those items. And you would have to do that, obviously, any way that you build an ADU. So WUI, this is pretty much everywhere in the Bay that you're gonna have to deal with right now. So that whole orange area right now, that's everything that falls under that wildland urban interface. And even Santa Cruz right here, it's actually, it's a part of WUI, but it's a totally different local responsibility area. So we're dealing with it in Santa Cruz as well. This is actually where you want to pay attention to insurance, because we want to build everything to that WUI code to get it allowed. But then once the house is done, you're going to be paying a little bit higher of your property insurance rates to cover that new parcel. But the good thing is if you did like a prefab manufactured, you have the WUI certification. So it basically states we have beefed up our siding, our insulation, our framing, all the things that we could to make sure that this house is a little bit less likely to burn. It'll help you get a lower insurance rate on it. Yeah, fire resistive roofs, doors, windows, siding, and decks all need to happen to get that WUI certification. So I had a couple of little info just to share with you for the county of Santa Clara. So this would be anything unincorporated. Yes, hon? Sure.
It took us like an incredible amount of time to go from 100 amp of service to 200. So when you add an ADU, I would assume you've got to increase it, or can you just hook these right into your?
It really depends on the parcel. So I've built ADUs where we didn't have to do a single thing extra. We had enough power to be able to tap into it without additional costs. I've also had it where I can think specifically of one property that was very deep, if you guys know where Aptos is, just way up in the trees up there, and they refused to do an additional service. And so she basically ended up getting approved by doing full solar panels and switched over just to a generator. And that was how she bypassed it. And it was because she was looking at the PG&E quote for their property. And at first they said, yes, we'll go ahead and do it for you for $80,000. Then they revoked that and tried to say it was going to be $200,000 for her to add it on. So it was actually much cheaper for her to just say, I'm going to throw solar panels on here and some batteries. And she ended up doing the whole thing for like less than $50,000. So there's definitely ways that you can bypass it, but home insurance in the state of California and PG&E in the state of California are two things I can't relieve you from. We can try to get those costs down on everything else as much as possible, but those are definitely two things that are going to affect us. And it might be sufficient. It just depends on exactly what the load is on the original house. So for example, is your primary house fully using every single amp that's accessible to you, or is only using a portion of that? And that's how you kind of know what's free and what you can pull from. So for the county of Santa Clara, they are requiring 1 parking space. So if you're going to be adding a unit, they want to have 1 additional parking space that gets off the road. What's interesting though, is there are a lot of conditions that they will waive that for you. So for example, you already have 3 parking spaces, but you're going to add an ADU. You can submit that to the county. Exactly that way. They won't require you to. You guys still hear me okay? Lost our little black thing. So again, rent out your ADU. You're allowed to rent your out as long as it's 30 days or more. So you can absolutely have it. You don't have to have a full year lease on it. You can have somebody come in and do traveling nurses. They're going to rent it for 30 days. As long as it's 30, you're allowed to rent them out. You do not need to live in your primary unit to be able to rent it out as well. In the city of Santa Clara, obviously we're a little bit tighter on our density on that. No parking is required for new units. Even if you're removing a parking space, like you're going to take over a garage, they do not require you to add a new unit to it. It's really nice. They are also allowing, for a little while there, they were saying absolutely no ADUs on historically designated property. Now they're allowing you to do that. They do, the jurisdiction does get a weigh in on what features you're using on that side, like what colors you're going to use, or if you're going to do any type of gutters or something like that. But they can't deny you based on the fact that you're historical designation. A couple more little California laws here that are kind of cool. There was a early in 2022, there was a case that was brought up to the state of California courts. They basically said that We won't allow you to bring an ADU because we're not allowing any demo of existing structures. So somebody wanted to tear down a shed to build an ADU and they were denied on the county. State of California said absolutely not, and they put a good blanket rule on that. So now you can no longer be denied because you need to demo the existing structures. Even if it's a house that's currently there, they can't require you to keep something like that. You're allowed to remove something to make use for an ADU. They also have a 16 maximum foot height that was always a firm, hard line that they wouldn't allow people to build an ADU. So if you can imagine, you have a really nice garage and you had this whole unit above the garage you had planned out. Now you're allowed to do that. Before they'd say the maximum square foot height, sorry, the maximum height has to be 16 foot. They weren't giving any allowance for those type of scenarios. And now they're saying you absolutely can match the existing house. So you could even have a primary structure and have plans for a brand new garage with a unit on top of it. And you're allowed to do that now, as long as you're matching the existing structure.
And then in that case, you know, some areas with square footage has to match some of these, in the cases, will you do manufactured home on top of it, you guys do that?
I don't think you'd want to. I think the engineering that would be required, I don't think it'd be cost effective, but yeah, you absolutely can.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I know had somebody that consulted me a while back that it was on the top of Mount Madonna and he wanted to build like a basically concrete parking structure and we were gonna deliver right to the top of the parking structure. So I know you absolutely can. It's just, it makes sense. Pencils out. That's, I'm not totally sure. I think it's gonna be more for site build, and especially if somebody already has an existing structure. This basically just allows that now they can build an ADU out of that. They don't have to bring the height down to go with that 16-foot rule. Is the big thing.
Regarding the garage,
Sure.
they can actually convert the garage
Mhm.
into ADU and then add one more unit on top of that.
No, so if you're gonna convert a garage, that becomes the ADU. But you have the ability that you don't have to convert the entire garage, you can convert just half of the garage. Like the house I grew up in had like a 3-car garage below and then it had like an apartment up above. So you're allowed to do it that way, or you can convert the entire thing as long as you're within the right. There was just a weird law that up until 2023, if you had that garage that was like a lower level parking, you could never have turned that top into an ADU. Because they wanted you to have this maximum height, no more than 16 feet. So there's no way you would have converted it, and now you're allowed to do that. And that's really the bigger thing.
So in those scenarios that the roof has to be a flat, more flexible. So
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, and it's good to think about. I know it's too much information, but I'd rather you guys know that these are all of the things that people have disposable. If they find the unit, they really want it converted, now at least you know some ideas that like, oh, there might be a way to do that. There was a lot of restriction up until recently, and a lot of that's all been removed. And that's really the good thing to know. So there's just a lot of new green pathways to be able to move forward on this stuff. The other big one is deed restrictions for HOAs. Morgan Hill would not allow a single HOA because the HOA, nobody could build an ADU. And now we bypass that, and it does not matter if it's in the CCNRs, it does not matter if it's the homeowner's goals, you are allowed to build an ADU, it's state law. You're not allowed to supersede that. The other one that's really big is the AB 2221. It used to be that a county or a city could give you a minimum requirement of your front setback. There's a lot of houses where the main house is built so far back and you maybe have, 20, 30 feet that you'd be able to build. Now they can no longer have a minimum setback. You're allowed to build that ADU in front if you want to. The other big one is that they would, sometimes you put an application together for a permit to try to get an ADU built, then they just would never respond to you. 3 months later, you still haven't heard back. Now by law, California law, if they don't respond to you within 60 days, it's approved. So I have a feeling they're not going to let too many of those slip under the radar, but it's at least it's a motivation. They have to get back to you. And if they're going to deny you and they say you can't build an ADU for any reason, they have to give you a list of reasons and ways to remedy your situation to be able to move forward.
So when you're talking about setback, if the TCNRs have a certain setback in the complex, you're saying that that cannot stop people any longer?
Yeah, it's no longer, the minimum front setback it was one of the big focus points of this AB 221 that they're trying to get rid of.
Wow.
So I don't doubt that you're always going to have a little bit of pushback when you try to submit it to the CCNRs and they say, oh, no, right here it says you can't do that. All you have to do is just go to the city planning office and tell them, according to this, it's legal law across the entire state now that no more minimum setbacks required. So there's two that are kind of quirky. They're pretty fun, but basically the main thing is we're trying to get to as many houses per lots as possible. I know we're on mixed feelings on all of that, but at least it allows it a little bit easier to create a duplex if needed. The condorization is one that I'm really curious about how this is gonna pay out. They're trying to make it so basically if you build an ADU on your property, even if you share water meters, you share a gas meter, electric, that you'd be able to divide that land and sell them as two separate parcels. So this is the AB 1033 quantization. This is already passed statewide, but right now it's elective if the county wants to opt into it. So Los Angeles County is the first one to say, let's go for it. I'm originally from Oregon and it's been passed in Portland for quite a while. So I like it because if you did have a really large vacant parcel, especially within a city, before you would have to develop a primary home and then divide off smaller units down the road. This basically makes it so you could put in infrastructure. You can build 6 units all at one time. You can build 5 units at one time. And then you can create your own condoization. You have your own rules of how they're going to do their maintenance, how they're going to do some type of like emergency access, and then figure out how they're going to do their utility split. But it just makes it so like everybody can develop an ADU on your parcel. And if you go to all this work and trouble to create an ADU and you just want to move into the ADU and you don't even want to live in the old house, now you can potentially sell it off separately. So it's going to be really interesting to see how it plays out. You guys should all know about it. If Texas as realtors, we're going to start seeing those listings and things like that too. So when you guys came in, there was a couple little flyers just up at the top, and I'll share it with everybody online, obviously too. These are just a couple of our models. These are the homes that we sell. The big one right now is through the end of the year. Anybody that comes our way that ends up wanting to buy a house like this, we can actually pay out realtor commissions on them. So we're doing a 6% realtor referral fee that we pay out at closing. So if you have somebody that wants to do one, you don't have to be a part of the process or the planning or anything like that. It's just an introduction. Let us know that these guys are interested and we'll see if we can help you figure out a way to build an ADU.
So this is the end of the year though?
Through the end of the year is what we have right now. We'll probably renew it. It just depends, but right now it's just for any leads that come in through December.
Where is the factory? Is it in Denver County?
So I actually have 2 factories I work with. One is actually closer to, it's Southern Oregon, and it's because of direct wood sourcing. By far, it's like the least expensive way to do it. And then we actually have another one that's down a little bit closer to like Sacramento area.
What the federal, right, the federal stuff. At what point is consider is that it's the time that you get paid or?
Yes, we just pay out on closing. So because it is property development and things like that can happen and delay, we just pay out a referral fee at the end of closing. So it's, I'd say most of the projects that we're seeing for ADUs, 6 to 8 months is about what we're seeing for them. Pretty easy. If they're developing raw land, that's usually when it takes a little bit longer than you're like 1 year to 2 years.
So, you say that. You go first.
You talk about setback in the front.
Mhm.
But what about setback to the neighbors in the back?
So it's almost always gonna be 4 feet. All of Santa Clara is 4 feet. Santa Cruz County is 4 feet. So even that's kind of interesting. Everything's always more complicated than a simple black and white. If you are building an ADU and there's nothing back there at all, plop it down 4 feet from either side, 4 feet from the back, you're good to go. If there's an existing garage back there that you want to utilize, as long as you're not adding more than about 150 square feet to it, you're actually allowed to use existing setbacks. So you are technically grandfathered in. You can convert a space that's already on the property line, which is kind of crazy.
What I'm thinking about is part of the land that you put one of these in your sort of backyard, but you have some houses that are sort of in your backyard, not on your property. Can the neighbor say?
No, yeah, you're fully allowed to do it, and you don't have to put a fence up or anything like that. You just, you have certain rights within your own property line, and it doesn't matter if they're back there, if they're looking at you or not, as long as it's the back of your property line and you've got the deed to it. You have to make sure, obviously, that you can get electricity back there and plumbing, so I'll give it that much of a caveat. And it does get a little more complicated when you're dealing with rural properties, because if you have to have a septic tank and the leach field, maybe that nice flat area that you really want to build on, that's your leach field. You have to either move that or figure out a way to do an engineered system so you can do a smaller leach field. So I'd say there's that kind of a caveat to it, but yeah, no, just 4 feet from your back property line.
And if that happens to block the view of those neighbors, it's not your problem.
No, yep. Don't have those restrictions.
You mentioned the leach field. If you have an existing, you're tying an existing sewer line where you live, you can automatically tie in your prefab homes, correct?
Yeah, so usually it's like a will serve letter. So different cities, it depends on who's providing your water. So like, I think that it's like county of Santa Clara has one, but then there's like certain municipalities that are hidden within it that are private water zones. And it's just whatever that will serve letter is. So usually, sometimes they'll do it for really inexpensive. I think like Scotts Valley is one of the more expensive ones I've seen. It's 8,000 to tap into it, but that's to get, use for life, basically. You get into interesting things when you go further down south, like if you are down in Morro Bay, for example, you can't get new water will serve. You can't, most of Monterey County, you can't get a new will serve letter. So they're already so at capacity with the current amount of pull that they're doing from the reservoirs, they won't actually give you the permission to do it. So you have to wait your turn in the queue to be able to get permission.
Thank you.
And did you have a question?
Yes. So in this one, if we have a client, we can connect with you and then we can walk us through the process, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's exactly what we're here for.
You can choose whether this is a building, you get on with contractor, get on with holding and services. So-
Site planner.
So how does this work? We just contact you or do we contact them separately or?
Yeah, usually what I'm finding to be able to get started on the process, usually the fastest, easy thing is to do is just have them reach out to Joyline Homes, because then we can chat with them and really kind of learn. The main thing for us, we want to make sure we can deliver to the parcel. So being able to just look at a map and be like, yep, it looks like we've got regular access to it, that'll save us a lot of trouble right off the bat. If somebody is ready to go, usually we connect them with their general contractor right off the bat.
So contract we sign with you or with the general?
So we with the general contractor, we don't act as a general contractor. I don't oversee them at all, but there's usually going to be issues that they want to prepare for immediately. Having a site plan is something that I advise, but it's not required. You're always going to have a general contractor that you want somebody to oversee you, especially if you're using a lender, like if they want to use financing. We work with anybody that does construction financing. They're going to ask for one responsible party that basically is who they give all the checks out to. So that's usually when you would start with like a general contractor first, and that's how they're getting their payouts.
And the most relevant question for all of us is, who gives us the check?
Joyline Homes. So all of that would come through the home supply side of things. So just to kind of make it 100% as clear as possible. A general contractor is who you're getting your initial permit through. They're the ones who are going to tell you exactly what it's going to cost to do a foundation. They're going to help you figure out your utility connections and figure out what your building envelope is. That way you know exactly where the house is going to go and exactly how big of the house it can be. A lot of times we work with a site planner because they are the experts in helping create some of this. Instead of the general contractor hiring a site planner and you're paying for that little connection, having a site planner yourself is a great way to get started. Because it's something that you can figure out when it comes to, for example, Hogan Land Services. The reason why we need them so much in Santa Cruz County is because we have to deal with septic tanks so frequently. Most general contractors do not know a lot of rules when it comes to septic tanks. They kind of have an idea of how big something should be, but sometimes it's really easy for them to get bogged down in those details. So instead, you want to be able to put together that application with, let's say you have to deal with the Coastal Planning Commission, that can take quite a while. So starting directly with the site planner is how you get those utilities approved, and then you hire the general contractor. So that's usually kind of the fastest way to get going on this stuff.
So we hire you,
You don't have to sign any contracts with me. I just talk to you. I talk to you and your client. But then we would depend on if you're ready to do a site planner, you've already, let's say you've got sewer that you're gonna tap in through on the city, you're gonna have water really easily. You can just go straight to a general contractor. You don't need to put together that site plan. He'll be able to do anything that you need to get this permits approved. If you're dealing with more rural property, you're gonna be designing like utilities, you're creating connections from scratch. That's really when you wanna have a site planner utilized. To help put that plan together before you try to make permits.
So I'm curious, we talking about general contractor.
Mhm.
Is that a general contractor from your end or from the manufacturer?
It can be from anywhere. So I've got a network of general contractors that I use, but you can use any general contractor. It's just anybody that's willing to help you put together the plans. I will say that like, there's a lot of general contractors out there. No matter what, I would always use my general contractor for installation, but you do not need it for anything else. Knowing how busy contractors are, I don't want somebody to sit and wait for 2 months before mine has a space in their queue to be able to put together a site plan. So I'd say usually you can start with any general contractor you feel comfortable with, but when it comes to installation, that's definitely a piece of the puzzle that Joyline would have to be a part of for that referral.
So the prefab will basically work with their client's general contractor.
Yep,
So
exactly.
you put things together.
Yeah, so the general contractor, what they're doing is preparing the site. So instead of needing to be a builder, they're not going to be framing anything. They're not putting in, anything that has to do with the actual home itself. All they're doing is they're going to take, I would like to order model of the Juniper or the Amora or one of these houses, and he goes off those specs and he prepares those foundations for you, and then we actually take care of the house ordering. And that's usually kind of the easiest way to describe it.